When The Last of Us released on the PS3 nearly 8 years ago back in 2013, it was a massive hit for Sony. So big, in fact, that Sony ported it over to the PS4 in a remastered edition where it found even more success. When a sequel was announced in December of 2016, expectations were high to say the least. Small sneak peeks at the game where you were playing as Ellie got fans salivating for more as we saw a bit of the visceral combat and the dark feel that Sony was going for in this sequel. Then, disaster struck as a massive leak hit Naughty Dog, spoiling major portions of the games for a lot of fans and earning the ire of many more. Why? Well, some had to say it was a tired storytelling trope killing off Joel, especially since fans wanted to play as the fan favorite character again. Some say it had to do with playing the majority of a game as someone completely new in Abby, and not only that, but playing as the killer of everyone's favorite character. Today we're going to discuss the things that I liked about The Last of Us Part 2, and we're also going to go into what I didn't like. And I really think my list may surprise you. How you doing, fellow geeks? Gamer Dad 79 here, and welcome to another game review here on the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at The Last of Us Part 2. Now, this one's going to be a little different. Mostly when I cover a review here on the channel, it's something on the smaller side, right? I don't normally cover major AAA games here on the channel, right? I normally cover indie games and some FMV games, stuff like that, stuff that really catches my interest. Normally, like, these big AAA games are normally covered front to back by a lot of the bigger YouTubers and a lot of the bigger reviewers out there, so I normally stay away from those. However, The Last of Us 2 kind of hit me hard in a lot of ways. If you follow the channel at all, and if you are on my Facebook page, you know that I have been streaming The Last of Us 2. You can go ahead and go check that out. That's all here, right here on the channel as well. But today I want to go over some of the stuff that really hit me hard, both in what some of the stuff I liked about The Last of Us 2 and some of the stuff I didn't like. And like I said in the intro, I think my list might surprise you, especially if you follow me on Facebook. You know I was a big supporter of The Last of Us 2, and I think you might be surprised by what I have to say about this game. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it and take a look at The Last of Us Part 2. In The Last of Us Part 2, you start off the game as Ellie. She and Joel have settled into a nice little community and have begun to form a life after the tragic events of the first game. You get a sense there's a tension between Joel and Ellie is beginning to discover who she is, beyond just someone who is immune to the virus. Ellie is discovering her sexuality as well as she gets older and feels an attraction to another member of the community, Dina. You do play as Joel for a bit at the beginning, and that's where things kind of go south. Joel and his brother Tommy rescue this girl, Abby, from an infected horde, only to discover that Abby and her group were hunting Joel in the first place. If you recall, at the end of the first Last of Us game, Joel wiped out an entire Firefly hospital after discovering that in order to get what was needed to create a cure for the virus, they were going to have to kill Ellie during the procedure. Joel had come to see Ellie as kind of like a surrogate daughter after losing his real daughter at the beginning of the first game, and he didn't want to lose Ellie too. Turns out, Abby's father was the head doctor at that Firefly hospital and was killed by Joel. So, not only were the remnants of the Fireflies looking for Joel because of the fact that he doomed all of mankind, but this was also personal for Abby. One of the more intense scenes in the game happens very, very early on, where you're in control of Ellie and you witness Abby kill Joel. It's very violent, it's very brutal and bloody, and Ellie essentially watches the ending of it. She didn't see the whole thing. When she comes upon them, you know, Abby has already beaten Joel to a bloody pulp, and then she ends him right there in front of Ellie. It's very visceral, and it sets up this huge revenge vengeance story, which the whole first part of the game is dedicated to. Um, Now, on the other hand, when we switch off, because that's one of the more controversial aspects of this game, you do switch off to Abby about halfway through the game. So essentially, what happens, and I'm going to try to stay away from spoilers, but I do want to get into some stuff here. So, like you saw at the beginning, we are going to be getting into some spoiler territory. So, if you don't want to be spoiled, I recommend you don't watch this video. Now, I've already kind of talked about some stuff there, but if you don't want to be spoiled too much, stay out of this. However, we're going to get into it, right? So at one point, you are in control of Ellie. You have gone through this big journey to try and find Abby, and at the end, you couldn't find her. You gave up a lot of yourself as Ellie in this hunt for Abby, and you couldn't find her. However, because of the fact of the amount of people that you killed, you ended up killing a lot of Abby's friends as Ellie. So Abby now tracks you down. All of a sudden, it looks like there's going to be a big battle between them. And it's, to me, I was like, could this actually be the end of the game? Because I stayed away from spoilers. Okay, I tried to do my best to stay away from the major spoilers in regards to The Last of Us 2. I did not follow the leaks. Okay, I knew Joel died because unfortunately I couldn't stay away from that, but I stay away from a lot of the major spoilers. And I thought this was coming towards the end of the game. But then as soon as this big fight was about to happen, and you were about to, the whole accumulation of this hunt for Abby was about to happen, the game switches gears. You go back in time 3 days, because Ellie's story took place over 3 days. You go back in time 3 days and you take over as Abby. That was kind of jarring for me, and I think for a lot of people as well. But Abby's story kind of turns into one of redemption. Now, she doesn't feel bad for what she did to Joel. She feels justified, and as the game goes on, you kind of feel like, Abby was kind of justified in what she did, because like I said earlier, not only did Joel kind of doom mankind, he killed Abby's father. So Abby was out for revenge. Now, during these 3 days, Abby befriends these two younger girls, one girl, one boy, to and they're part of this rival faction, but they save her from something, and she finds out they're kind of rebelling out of that faction. So she kind of befriends them, and she feels obligated to help them in some way. And it's her story kind of is a reverse of Ellie's, right? Ellie's is about revenge and vengeance, and Abby kind of goes, I have a lot of blood on my hands. Maybe by helping these two, helping them survive, helping them live, I can wash some of that blood away. And so her story is kind of one of redemption, while Ellie's is one of vengeance. It was really difficult to take over as Abby at that point. I think maybe if the developers would have reversed it and you would have played as Abby first, because while you're playing as Ellie, you go through and you kill all these people, and you kill a lot of Abby's friends because you're hunting for Abby. Now, when you take over as Abby, now you get to know these people because they're Abby's friends. And I think there was not as much of an emotional impact when Ellie killed those people as there would have been if you would have played as Abby first and gotten to know these people more. Not only that, but there is a scene where when finally everything catches up, when you play through Abby's 3 days, there is that first battle, between Abby and Ellie. You play as Abby, which to me was really, really weird, because you spent all this time hunting Abby, trying to kill her, and now you take over. And now during this battle between these two characters, right, the protagonist and the antagonist, even though there really is not an antagonist in this game, you are playing the person that you were hunting. And to me, that was very jarring, and I wasn't a huge fan of that. It felt like, throughout the whole battle, I wanted to be playing as Ellie. I'm like, I don't want to be beating up Ellie. I don't want to be doing this because I spent a whole game with Joel and Ellie at one point, and I learned to love these characters. And while I said yes, that Abby killing Joel is kind of justified, I still more liked the Ellie character because you spent all this time with her and now you gotta literally beat the crap out of her playing as Abby, and that just took me out of things really big time. Okay, so here are some of the things I really enjoyed about The Last of Us Part 2. The combat is some of the most visceral and violent I have ever played in a game. You feel every hit, every gunshot, both to your protagonist and to your enemies. Not only is the combat brutal and unforgiving, the game also makes you feel bad for all the killing that you do, especially as Ellie. When you kill somebody, you will then hear someone calling out for them by name. So unlike most combat-heavy games where the bad guys are just kind of like nameless fodder for you to gun down and whose only purpose is there for you to kill, in The Last of Us 2, they have names and people that care about them, so you feel that in every single death. You also kind of get to see the after effects these killings have on Ellie. In her quest for revenge, she gives up major parts of herself. She is sacrificing herself to kill the person that took away this father figure from her. It's a very emotional journey. When you look at some of Naughty Dog's other games, like, say, Uncharted, and Nathan Drake is gunning down all these bad guys, you never see that has kind of an effect on Nathan. It doesn't bother him that he's essentially a mass murderer. I'm also a big fan of the narrative, though this is a bit of both like and dislike. It kind of has, the story has this yin and yang thing going on between Ellie and Abby. As I said earlier, Ellie's journey is all about revenge and vengeance against Abby. You feel it in every decision that Ellie makes along the way. She sacrifices so much of herself to get back at Abby that each death, and you see it, each death is eating away at her soul to the point that the person that is left at the end is not the same person that started on this journey. As for Abby, while her journey is no less brutal, more so in some ways, her story is more about redemption. While she feels justified in what she did to Joel, and like I said, I think she was justified, she knows there is too much blood on her hands and she has to do something, metaphorically speaking, to clean some of that blood off. I kind of said this before, but she befriends a couple of kids from a rival faction and she protects them through this wild journey. One of the most memorable scenes in the entire game is this mad dash through a burning village. It was a brutal thrill ride, taking on different enemies while also dealing with the entire village burning and falling down around you. It was incredibly intense. Now for some of the things I didn't like so much. As I said before, the narrative was something I liked and didn't like. I was not a fan of the way the game switched off between Ellie and Abby. I kind of mentioned that before. We reach this huge crescendo with Ellie's story only for things to come to a screeching halt. So now we can flash back to 3 days prior and take over in Abby. Not only that, but and I said this before too, but this is part of what I didn't like about it. Not only that, but the first confrontation between Abby and Ellie, you really want to be in control of Ellie, and Naughty Dog puts you in control of Abby. Being in control of Abby in and of itself is problematic because you physically hate her after what she did to Joel. And then to take control of this character and keep her alive is emotionally difficult. I understand that Naughty Dog wanted you to sympathize with her, but it was really hard for me to do that. I especially did not want to control Abby during the first meeting between her and Ellie, especially after spending the first half of the game hunting her down. Playing as Abby killing some of the other people in the game is one thing, but then playing as Abby during a fight with Ellie after everything we had gone through with Ellie in the past is an extremely difficult proposition and one that I just didn't quite enjoy. As for the way the game controlled, it was beautiful. They spent a lot of time making this game a technical masterpiece. I never felt like I was struggling with the controls. I never felt like I was fighting with things. Everything felt very fluid, very easy to control. So much to the point that once I finished with The Last of Us 2, I had just rented Days Gone, but it was so difficult for me to go into Days Gone because Days Gone is not anywhere near as fluid as The Last of Us Part 2 was in its combat, so it was very difficult for me to play that game. So I actually ended up sending it back, and I'm going to rent it again at a later time, maybe after a game I had not that didn't emotionally attack me the way The Last of Us Part 2 did. And when I mean this game was a technical masterclass, I absolutely mean it. Like, and this may not seem like a big deal. There's a scene where Ellie has her shirt removed because she's beat up, right? And someone's gonna take care of her. The way the shirt came off was extremely smooth and fluid, and that's something you don't see in games yet, right? Those small little details is very difficult to get in games. A lot of times you'll either see the game, the shirt kind of become polygonal as it's coming off, or they'll just completely cut away, and then when it comes back you'll see the person with the shirt off or piece of clothing or whatever. But this showed the shirt being pulled up off of over Abby's head, and it was so fluid and so gorgeous. And there's a lot of different small things like that throughout the game that really really touch on how much Naughty Dog put into this game, how much passion and love Naughty Dog put into this game. When you also talk about how gorgeous the game was, you just look at like everything around you as you're walking around, the vistas, the dilapidated buildings, everything in that game was done with such care and precision. It's a sight to behold. The game is just absolutely beautiful in so many ways, and like I said, it is a technical masterclass. Final thoughts. I could spend hours talking about the different aspects of The Last of Us 2. Condensing it down to a 15-minute or less review is very tough because of how much there is to talk about, both good and bad. Let's put it this way. Usually when I finish a game with a deep narrative, I get what's called a game hangover. I was just so deep into whatever game I was playing that I feel lost and I don't know what to do next. I did have that feeling with The Last of Us 2, but it wasn't anywhere as deep or as profound. I felt lost after games like Oxenfree or Spider-Man and Red Dead Redemption, but not so much with The Last of Us 2. There were just a lot of things that I just didn't like about the decisions that were made in regards to the game's narrative. However, there were an equal amount of stuff that I loved. The Last of Us 2 has this distinction of being a game that sits firmly in the average territory of games that I absolutely love. I struggled with this review because I simultaneously loved and hated this game at the same time. The game affected me so badly that, like I said before, I could not play Days Gone, even though I was really looking forward to it. I kept comparing everything that I was doing in Days Gone to my time with The Last of Us 2, and it made me playing Days Gone, it made that game sour for me. At the end of the day, I'm happy with my purchase of The Last of Us 2. It made me question my morality as a video game character more than any other game I've ever played. It made me really think about the decisions I made and made me care or hate these characters almost more than any other game before it. Alright guys, that is it for today's review. The Last of Us 2 is very polarizing, right? There's a lot of people who hate it and a lot of people who love it, and I feel I'm somewhere down that middle, right? I don't absolutely hate it and I don't absolutely love it. It wasn't the greatest thing. It wasn't the worst thing. There was definitely some narrative decisions that I wasn't a fan of, but there was also quite a bit that I really loved about this game. So let me know in the comments section below if you've played The Last of Us 2, and I really want to know what you thought of this game. Let me know what you thought about this game. All right, guys, that is it. Until next time, fellow geeks, I am GamerDad79. Keep on geeking on.